Hello.
Episode 9 already. And we thought, in honor of yesterday being the anniversary of 9/11, we were just kind of reflecting, as many people did yesterday and this week, just like the magnitude of that event and where we were and what was going on in our lives. And we thought we'd discuss that today.
Right, and we open with a short video that we took about a year ago at the 9/11 Memorial site at the World Trade Center. I think it was in June of
Yeah.
2019. I visited there a couple of times, and it's always a very powerful thing. I think it's kind of an interesting area now with the Oculus all the shopping and things like that in the area. But it's also, it's a very moving site, and of course, Freedom Tower is right there. We took a bunch of
We
pictures
took
of
so many
that when we
pictures.
were there. But that's also one of the reasons why we wanted to share some, positive, upbeat stories about New York the last time, because obviously 9/11 was kind of on our minds, but we wanted to sort of bookmark the not bookmark, but bookend the event with some positive stories and then some reflections about it today.
Yeah, and if you are ever in New York and you get a chance to see the what they created, it's monumental. I mean, you don't really realize the massiveness of that
Right,
space and that
right,
hole and how beautiful they made it after all that. So, uh, and they have everybody's name inscribed around the whole perimeter of it. So then you can see,
right.
like, um, you know, just read people's names and like all the people that were affected by that.
Yeah, and it's really it's very moving. I think I don't know that there's there's not any sort of good way to memorialize a horrible event, but sometimes creative people manage to really capture the right feeling, like the Vietnam War Memorial. I think this is sort of on that same level.
Definitely.
And we were thinking a lot. I mean, every year we think kind of like back about where we were, what was going on in our lives. Our kids, kind of grew up in the post 9/11 world. Our oldest daughter was in kindergarten. In fact, I think she had just started
Just started
kindergarten
kindergarten.
that week, because they started in those days. They started after Labor Day, and so this is kind of the only world our children have known.
Yeah, and our middle one son Mark was in preschool, and I was pregnant with Claire, like 7 months pregnant
Right,
with Claire. Which it seems so funny that, or not funny, but it's been 19 years. I mean, like, it's so crazy to think that so much time has passed
right.
since this happened.
The thing that always sort of, in my memory, the thing that really sort of just jumps out at me is that because we had little kids, we lived in this sort of bubble where we weren't as much. I shouldn't say we weren't affected or aware, but our morning routine on a weekday was that we would be up early, obviously, and the kids would be up, and we'd have cartoons on television while we
Yeah,
were kind of getting
Arthur.
yeah kind of getting ourselves ready and making the coffee and all that. So for the early moments of as it all unfolded on television, we were unaware of what was going on. Our oldest, as I said, she had just started kindergarten, and she was in morning class, and it started at 8:30 in the morning, which would be 9:30, New York time. So much of this had already happened, and we were unaware of it. And we're sitting there with our local PBS station on television, with kids watching whatever they were watching, and the phone rang, and your mom
Yep, it was my
called.
mom.
And I was the one who answered the phone, and she started to say, hey, are you watching the news? Do you know what's going on? And I'm like, we don't watch the news, and we got the little kids up in the morning. And she started describing, a plane hit a building in New York. And in my mind, I'm like, I couldn't, I had no mental impression of this. I didn't understand what
The
she was,
magnitude of
yeah,
it.
what she was trying to describe.
And I think, did she come over? I
A
think she
little
ended
bit
up
later,
coming
she
over.
did,
Yeah.
right. I so she kind of filled us in over the phone a little bit, and I kind of did I give the phone to you, or
Probably.
yeah. So then the elementary school was only 2 blocks away, a block and a half. So I walked Emma to school that morning, and it was the eeriest. I mean, just dead silence. All these parents walking their, especially with the littler kids, walking their
Yeah,
kids
because it's
to
not like
school.
you're going to tell them there's something bad just happened when you didn't even know what was happening,
Right.
you know?
And the immediate, we hadn't even seen any television coverage at that point. So we didn't have, we just knew this terrible thing had happened without any sort of background.
Yeah, and I just remember once we did get back and then turn on the TV. Uh, Obviously, the second tower hadn't been hit yet, so it was just almost like what is happening? How did this happen? Was it on purpose? Is it an accident? And just as all the things unfolded that
Right.
day, it was just kind of like crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically. Being pregnant, I was like, I wish I could have a beer right now when we were at night watching
Right.
it. It was like
Right.
3 days of like just constant
Right.
watching the TV to see what was happening and waiting for when they had like all the medical personnel available,
Right.
but then there was like no people to bring there, and it was
Right,
just
the
kind of
blood
like,
drives and everything, and
Yeah.
just the scenes of all of these places that were set up to be triage centers, and emergency worker, doctors and nurses and so forth, waiting for patients that would ultimately never come.
right,
And even though in retrospect, given the magnitude of how could anyone have survived the collapse of the buildings? But you still just, you thought there would be people, there were survivors obviously who got out of the building, but I mean, I thought there would be more survivors. And that was to me, that was a really haunting part of watching it the next few days.
Yeah.
Was just this, sort of the absence of any good news. After a tragedy, there's almost always some story of, after an earthquake or something like that, finding survivors after some period of time. And that good news story just didn't come. And I found that in and of itself to be just really hard.
definitely, because you just hope for the best, that you think like it can't, it can't be as bad as it's portraying, but then in actuality, it was.
Right. And one of the things too is that I don't think we kind of grasp the fact that this really would be sort of something that affected our lives for, going on 2 decades, both in terms of decisions that the government made and of course the millions of people who've served in the military in the meantime and just the impact was, even though you could appreciate the enormity of it at the time, I don't think any of us could really have foreseen how long this would continue to affect our lives. I mean, obviously the tragedy of it would affect people. You don't get over loss like that, but I
Right.
mean, just the way it's just still sort of affects lives.
And I think also having small kids, then it was once they got old enough to understand, before they were going to learn about it in school, having discussions about what happened and where we were on that day and just the magnitude about all. We had to have many conversations with our kids over the years, just kind of explaining what happened.
Right. I remember, that the Friday, so that was a Tuesday, obviously. The Friday of that week, the kids, well, at that time, Emma was the only one in school. Her elementary school had it was kindergarten through 5th grade. So they had a little school assembly, and it was all, they didn't talk in a lot of detail because obviously they know there were still some very young kids in the school. But I kept thinking, yeah, but that they're hearing things. And so the school assembly was all, about peace and unity. And I mean, it was a really well-intentioned thing, but I knew that even the youngest kids were hearing things that they couldn't necessarily grapple with.
Right.
And you'd gone out that Friday night because one of your close friends was getting married. And so you went out with friends. And so I remember sitting with Emma and Mark in their bedroom and trying to kind of coax out, find out what, she knew. And I said, so were kids, in school talking about something that happened in New York this week? And she's like, no. And, eventually, I didn't want to be too, explicit because if she didn't know anything about it,
Yeah,
I didn't
why
want
bring
to
it up?
scare her.
Yeah.
Right. So I finally said something about, did you hear something about a plane crash? Oh, yeah, about that plane that hit that building. And so we tried to have this, sort of conversation about, just trying to be, rather than going into like the details, but more like, we have to just treat people better than sometimes we do. And, I don't even remember exactly what I said. And I remember she said something like, well, the good thing is the bad guys got killed too. And I mean, it's just a 5-year-old child.
Right.
Of course, you don't expect, but I was trying to say, well, not like I had any sympathy for the people who did this by
Right.
any means. But on the other hand, you're trying to, like, how do you talk to a 5-year-old? Like, it's not just if a bad person does something, you kill the bad person. You know what I mean? It's like trying to come up with some sort of more nuanced moral thing. And
Right.
So I had read something that a Greek Orthodox priest had said that really kind of touched me, which he said is that, obviously the main tragedy is all the innocent people dying, but it's also kind of tragic that those conspirators, however you want to describe them, somehow or another they could not have come to their senses and realize what they were doing was wrong, before they carried it out. And in a sense, that's sort of a loss too. So I tried to say something along those lines to her, and I'm sure I made no sense whatsoever to a 5-year-old. But
It's all you can do at that point when they're so tiny. You don't know
Right.
really what to say.
right,
But yeah, we just wanted to kind of just say sorry to, there's, I'm sure maybe people that we are in contact with that are more affected by it. We've got lots of friends in New York who live there and things like that. So that was the other scary part, is like not knowing, like, do I know somebody who works in
Right.
the World Trade Tower?
right. One of my sisters had a high school classmate who was a lawyer in New York. One of my high school friends, his sister lived in the Battery Park area. Fortunately, was not actually. I think she was out of town when it actually happened. But, so when a terrible event happens, it affects more. There's a circle of people who are immediately affected, but it also affects a broader community. And I think it makes a lot of us think, or it made a lot of us think about how we're all connected and we're all closer to tragedy than maybe we necessarily know until it happens.
Definitely. We're going to share some pictures of the site around there that we took when we were in New York, and a video of the...
A little clip of the Bruce Springsteen song "The Rising," which I think is kind of appropriate for the times.
Definitely. So our next video will be more upbeat, but we just wanted to share our thoughts since something significant happened. Anniversary of just not ignoring it, and
Right.
like it's a day that we move on, and like, okay, now we don't have to think about it anymore, but it is significant still 19 years later. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.